Welcome to the Thrive Today podcast. I'm Natalie Born. I'm the media host for Thrive Today and the founder of Innovation Meets Leadership. We are a platform for women who lead and believe. And today we are sitting down with our founder of Thrive Today, Colleen Rouse. Hello, hello.
Hello, and we're switching roles.
We
are switching seats today, and I love this topic. This is one of those topics that, not everybody wants to talk about.
That's
because anytime you mention the word conflict, people kind of have a whole different set of opinions about.
They tense up.
They do. Or, I have always said, people that like conflict, I'm worried about you.
Right.
there's something wrong.
That's right.
But we're going to unpack something that is really important. And I love that you're delving into this because let me just say, I have seen you in action. I've seen you as a leader deal with conflict, and I've seen you handle it gracefully and so well. So we're going to use this model, and I have to read it off the cue card, people, because
it's a little lengthy.
It is lengthy. The Thomas-Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument.
Yes.
The TTKCMI.
I've actually never called it that. I think I just call it the Kilmann Conflict Model. Yeah.
But apparently this has been around for 50 years, tried and true stuff. Okay. So we're going to explore the 5 different styles, but explain to me and to our listeners and those who are watching, because I know a lot of people are probably not familiar with this. So what is the foundation of this model, and why is it so important that we understand and grasp what our default response is to conflict, and why is that so important?
Yeah, so we all have a default mode, right? We all have a certain way that we like to respond when conflict comes up. And, as you go through this today and as we talk about this, I hope you'll identify your default mode, because we all have one. And I would say our default mode is when conflict comes up, this is how we respond 70 or 80% of the time. That's our default. And so when we think about this model, and we're going to put it on the screen for you to look at, but there's 2 ways that we respond. There's assertive, which is where we pursue our own interests. And then there's cooperativeness, where we pursue the interests of others. And when I think about the Bible, for example, right, where James tells us if it's possible, right, or actually he tells us to be slow to speak and quick to listen. And, and then we also know in the Bible, we talk about if it's possible, be at peace with all men. What I love about this conflict model is it really helps us to understand that there are 5 different styles. And if we're wise, which I know we all want to be wise, we are actually going to pull out the style that we need depending upon what season we're in and why we need that style. And so we'll talk about each of these styles and why it's important to deploy a certain style in certain situations. So we'll go through some scenarios, which I think will be fun for everybody and maybe even a little funny. I don't know.
Well, and I love this because obviously we know our preference and we are skilled at our preference. So we're just talking about scaling skill set here. And so as we're listening, as we're watching and taking this in, this would be really good for us to not just identify ours, but then just see the value of the other. So let's start with the first one, okay? Because this one kind of gets the bad rap, okay? This is the competing style, all right? And this can feel like super aggressive and in confrontation, but what is it actually the right leadership approach to do the competing style of conflict?
Yes. So my hope is if you look at these 5 styles and you say, oh, my 80% default is competing, I hope to change your mind today to change your style a little bit. The competing style is going to be high assertive and low cooperativeness. Let's talk about when would we deploy high assertive and low cooperativeness. Typically, we'll do that in an emergency situation. Yeah. So let's say that...
Triage.
Yes. Like let's say you're in a situation where the building's on fire and you tell people to move and they say, no, I want to finish my report. And you say, get up and get out now, right? It's this, stop. I have even a scenario where let's say you're on a construction site and you see somebody doing something wrong and it could get many, many people hurt, right? That's kind of that stop work authority. Just stop and don't move forward until we fix this problem. So there are situations where we want to deploy that. Where we have to be really careful is if we say, I'm going to win and nobody else gets to win, if we kind of have that mentality about competing, we've kind of entered an arena, if that's our default, where most people probably don't like to work with us, they don't like to be led by us, and ultimately we're going to create a lot of havoc if that's just the way from which we lead.
So if the situation demands it, I'm thinking the way God designed our bodies, we're going to get the fight or flight.
Yes.
And we just have to kind of go with that instead of being reticent because of our whatever insecurities or who we're talking to, that we just address what needs to be addressed immediately. Okay, so that's great. So let's talk about the next one, because I think that a lot of female leaders lean towards this one. And this is accommodating because we like harmony. We value relationships. So, but I think what we need to, if this is our default, we have to recognize the difference between healthy accommodation and unhealthy self-sacrifice.
That's right. So here's the challenge with this one. When we think about accommodating, it's very low assertiveness and it's very high cooperativeness, which is great. But if you always deploy that style, again, I say 80% of the time, what's actually going to happen is people are going to view you as a doormat. Let's be honest. So there are times when we absolutely want to pull out that accommodating style, but we need to be careful that we're not doing it so much that people are like, oh, don't bother asking for their opinion. They'll always go with what we want because they just always accommodate. Yeah, what that also means is we're not bringing our thought leadership to the table to help the decision or to help the conversation we're having. So when we think about this style in particular, we want to be careful here. Again, there are times to pull that style out. I think about when we are working on a situation and we need to choose peace over harmony. And maybe you're in a position of power and you're like, you know what? When I think about the work this person has done, when I think about how they've shown up, they deserve X, Y, and Z. And while it may not be normal for us to do this, let's go ahead and accommodate the request for the following reasons. I think there are times when we pull that out, but if we only operate from a place of accommodation, then people begin to believe we don't have opinions, and we don't want that. Like we do want to be seen as a thought leader. So we need to just, again, all of these are important of like how and when do we deploy them so that we can help people be successful.
Yeah, that's really good insight, because I can think of times where I had a preference, but when do you bring in the accommodating piece? When do you move towards that method? I think it's when you prioritize things.
Yes.
Like it's in the pick your battles kind of realm.
It is. And
that there are sometimes you're doing it and it requires you as a leader not to fear losing.
That's right.
Because and sometimes I know that what I had to deal with myself was, what am I trying to protect?
Yeah.
And why am I trying to protect something? Because at the end, is it something that's a personal desire, personal preference, when I need to be more accommodating?
Yes.
And then the flip side of it, I love what you said, because I think sometimes we get dismissed from the table because we are too accommodating, and people make assumptions about us. And then we're frustrating. Why don't people ask me? Because they know what you're going to say. Wow, that's a good check for us.
Yeah, that's good cause and effect. And I also think that we have to be careful, because if you live in this style, what typically happens is you might feel resentment or burnout because you're upset that nobody's asking you, but you've created a kind of a swirl around you where no one asks you, right? So it's almost like we get what we've given out and then we're surprised that that's what we're getting. So we do have to be very careful with this one. I also think this is a great mode if we want to serve people.
Yes.
But, again, I want us to not see ourselves as doormats. Even a servant doesn't have to be a doormat. So it's good to serve. It's not good to become a doormat with it.
Yes. Okay, let's move to the next one, which is called avoidance. And there are a lot of people that say, this is my safest option. And I would think that that's going to be because you are just so overwhelmed. And so you choose avoidance just because you are flat worn out. You can't handle something and you want to handle something well. So it gets pushed to the back burner because you can't handle it. And sometimes that is a good choice.
Yes.
But I would think also avoidance is that you overwhelmed, you don't have the answer, or you just are so averse to conflict.
Yes.
So what are the hidden costs when leaders consistently avoid those difficult conversations?
Okay.
And then let's talk about the frustration they create in that regard.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a big one to unpack. So if we think about where it sits on the spectrum, right? It's low assertiveness and low cooperation. I want to add a third scenario to what you just said, which is, let's say the person that we're dealing with is angry or even on the verge of becoming violent.
Yeah.
This is also a good reason to avoid.
Yeah.
So again, these are tools in our tool belt. And so if we get into a situation, I actually had a work situation where I was talking to an employee and they started screaming. They were gritting their teeth. This was intense. And I stopped them and I said, "You're not ready to have the conversation. I'm going to back out of your office. And when you're ready, we'll talk." And so it was one of those moments of like, this is only going to escalate to a point where they're out of control. I don't want that for them. And honestly, I don't want that for myself because it becomes unsafe. And if you don't know where someone's at mentally, if they're not acting stable, avoid. So there are good moments to avoid. Now, however, let's take it to the flip side of what you were talking about, which is leaders who avoid. Yes, that creates a mental toll and attacks on you personally because you're not confronting challenges that are happening either in the organization or in your team. But what it also does is it creates this sense that people can just get away with anything because they're never going to be confronted on it. Yeah. And so if I know I'm never going to be confronted no matter what I do, we've talked about this in another podcast, but culture is the worst behavior we allow. So now we're allowing this culture,
what we permit.
Yes, in our organization that shouldn't be there. So ultimately, people will feel, at first they'll love it, but then eventually they'll be frustrated because not only are you avoiding confronting them, but you're also avoiding confronting other bad behavior that's happening in the organization. So this one is good to deploy if you feel unsafe, not great to deploy as a leadership style.
Yeah, because I think, personal opinion, if I think about if there's one thing that's going to cause your team to lose respect for you, it is this. Yes, avoid making decisions. You're going to frustrate. But if you avoid handling situations where everybody else sees this needs to be taken care of, then you're going to lose credibility and you're going to lose the right to lead.
That's right.
So this is why we can learn. These are skills we can learn. So we can be so honest about this because we can learn these skills.
That's right. All
right. Let's talk about the next one. This is so rich. Compromising.
Yes.
So this is oftentimes the most practical solution when conflict arises. What makes it work? What makes it effective? And what makes it fall short?
Okay. So this one is kind of what I think most of us are used to when we think about leadership or negotiation. We think, okay, we're all going to come to a compromise. And then if we all remember the book, Getting to Yes, right? We had to come up with our what's our BATNA, right? What's our best alternative? So we're coming in thinking, okay, they're going to ask for these things. Here's what I'm willing to give up. Here's what I'm not willing to give up. And so that's kind of how we approach a lot of things, is thinking, what is the lowest, rung that I'm willing to give up on? And what are they going to ask for? And let me come in ready. And yeah, I mean, that is an approach and that does happen at times. But I really think that this is a good skill to have. I mean, it's truly a negotiation skill. But again, I feel like there are certain times where we should pull this one out. One of those times is if you have low trust. So I really see compromise as a low trust conversation where you really don't have anything to go on but these chips that you're trading. So that's typically when you'll use compromise, is when there's not a huge amount of trust in the room. And so it's really like, hey, help me understand what you want. Okay, here's what I want. How do we meet in the middle? Again, it's a good skill. If this is our default, it's still not the best because we have so many other tools in our tool belt that we could be using. So this one's useful when time's limited. So let's say you just have a very limited amount of time to get through something. You got to get to a decision. This one could be deployed then. Both parties are obviously going to give up something, but it gives you that, okay, let's get to a common ground.
Yeah, I like that. And I can see that this might be a tool that you would use when you are early in a position where people don't know you yet. Because one of the things that will earn you trust is your ability to listen.
That's right.
So if it's not huge decisions, it's actually used as an opportunity to build trust.
Yes.
So I love that. I don't,
right.
We don't often think about that, but that's an important, especially in today's day and age. All right, the next one, collaborating.
Yeah.
Now, I would just say this is probably me. Okay, this is my default.
Yes.
And it is my default. And a lot of people consider this is the ideal.
They do.
Right? This is the gold standard. Well, it's not, right? But why is it so powerful? When is it so powerful? And why is it often the most difficult approach to achieve?
Well, this one is high assertiveness and high cooperation. So you really have to be engaged in two things. One, understanding truly what do you want, and then also I have to really understand what you want. And the only way that we can get to common ground is through collaboration. This is also, in my opinion, you either are building trust through the process or you already have high trust. And so I trust that when we come to the table to collaborate, we're going to get to a good decision on the outcome and the goal. So I really like this one because it forces us to seek to understand before we're understood, which that is a very biblical thing.
Sounds biblical.
Yes. And so I love it because, when we think about collaboration, I have to really understand your position inside and out. I have to understand your needs. I have to understand what you're after. And I have to be willing to say, not that mine is going to be lower than yours, but it's at the same level, and how can we make this work? So one, if you think about some of these positions, it's like I'm putting my position below yours, like when I accommodate or when I avoid. But when I collaborate, we're putting all of our eggs in the same basket, and we're saying, everything matters. Let's figure out how to get this done. It is my default style too. I enjoy it, but I also understand that there are times, again, because of timing or safety, when we can't deploy collaboration, and we have to understand when that is. And especially when I can't deploy this, I'm sure you feel the same way. I kind of feel hurt. Like, man, I really wanted to collaborate, but that's not where this is going.
Yeah, and it requires maturity on the part of everyone involved.
Yeah.
What's interesting, because Dennis and I were going to Israel, working with leaders for 3 years in a row. And it's very interesting, their style.
Yes.
And they would be called collaborators, but the way that presents, the way that looks, isn't this sweet necessarily conversation.
It's a little noisy.
It was noisy. It was like they were honest and open, they're passionate. And then at the end of the conversation, it's like, okay, let's go get coffee. And,
you're like,
over and over, we were talking to businessmen on the way over there. And they were all telling us the same thing. They had to make this adjustment to the way they were. They're like, wait a minute, it just totally rattled them.
Yes.
So collaboration requires sometimes the longer conversation, the difficult conversation where you're standing on something because it's a conviction, not because you're selfish. But at the same time, this is the dichotomy. Yeah. What I learned was, okay, if I want to collaborate, I'm coming to the table with an openness.
Yes.
And so what I believe is I have a fantastic idea.
Yes.
I've thought this through. I've researched it. I've done my homework. I believe in my idea.
Yeah.
However, there might be an even better one out there.
That's right.
And so I just raised the standard beyond what my own personal preference was.
Yeah.
And so it does take time. But I think when you're talking about decisions that are going to deeply impact your church, your organization, you have to be willing to, and you cannot have a scarcity mentality about this.
That's
you
right.
can't think everything has to be solved in this one meeting. This is the progress we made. We're going to revisit this again. We're not where and I think as leaders, the Lord's going to give you a sense of whether you reach that point or not, or whether there's some further work that needs to be done.
Well, I love what you're saying there, because this is a really healthy form of conversation when you give it time. A lot of people are impatient and they want to get to the answer really quick. Collaboration is a little bit longer tail where you actually have to slow things down a little bit. And that can be hard for leaders who are always on the move, who are busy and
Which
just
we
like
are.
all of us, right? But some people are just like, let's get to the decision. If you say that a lot, then you may want to check whether or not collaboration. If you said collaboration was your default, but oftentimes you're getting behind everyone and pushing them in meetings and on decisions, then it's not It's actually not your default. And so it's really important for us to look at. We can even survey our team and ask them which one they think our default is. Yeah. And they will tell us that, hey, it's actually not collaboration. Maybe it's one of these, maybe it's competing. I was talking to a group of salespeople and they said, oh man, we just compete. We didn't realize we thought we collaborated, but after looking at these definitions, we realized we're just competing for the sale, competing with one another, competing even with our client. And they said, we need to step back because collaboration is actually our way forward. So that's just interesting. It's my favorite. Again, it's tools in our tool belt. We need to be able to know what situation we're in and which one we need to pull out.
Awesome. This is so helpful. This is really good. This is an episode we need to watch again, listen to again, and so that it really, all of this begins to land on us. So, okay. So as we wrap this up now, give us one practical piece of advice that, as far as handling conflict as leaders and as female leaders in our relationships in our day-to-day.
Yeah. So I think the first thing we need to do is figure out what is our conflict style. Now, we may have a different conflict style at home than we have at work. And
not unusual.
Yeah. Our spouse or someone close to us will let us know. They will if we ask and if we honestly want to know. But then we need to ask for feedback and figure out how can I flexibly move into some of these other styles? Because as a leader, we need to be flexible. And when I think about, let's go back to competing. Let's say that you unfortunately have to make a big cut at work, or you have to change the budget because you're having cash flow issues. That's at the end of the day, we have to just make the change.
The hard call.
And it's a competing thing where it's like, hey, but it's ultimately for the survival of the organization. That's not a time to pull everyone in the room and collaborate, unfortunately. Yeah. We have to move and we have to make a decision quick. Oftentimes we shy away from that because, that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like the way I want to show up. But sometimes we have to make hard calls, hard decisions. So as we look at these, know your default and then ask yourself, what's one I can work on putting in my tool belt over the next 60 to 90 days and work on delivering on that other style, because that's the only way we grow. Find one thing a day we can do to be uncomfortable, right? That's how you grow as a leader. So
awesome. This has been so good. I know I have some really good takeaways. So here we are.
Yep.
And thank you for today's session.
This was fun.
All that you shared. Yeah. It was fantastic.
Yeah, well, I want to thank our ladies for being a part of the Thrive Today community. What are you waiting for? Head over to thrivetoday.com to get in community with us. We do monthly coaching calls, incredible curated boxes that come to our door every quarter. And then we also have so much more content that's at their fingertips.
We're here for you, girls.
Don't forget to thrive. We'll see you next time.